Dear students, we are back with our lecture on design of facilities. In the previous interaction, we started discussing about the need of parking facilities, and then we talked about the various types of interventions which can be there. But we could not complete our discussion on those interventions, and in today's interaction we are going to continue with that, and then after that we will be taking up the guiding principles, then on street parking facilities, and based on the availability of the time, on the basis of what type of discussion and the extent of discussion is going on the previous two things, we may take up the parking for disabled persons and the on the street parking facilities. Let us first of all look at the things which are being left in the previous interaction. We talked about the management, we talked about the prohibition, we talked about the restrictions. The another thing which can be there is with respect to the travel mode. Now, when we are talking about this travel mode, then one thing which can be looked at is that the parking fee which is being charged, that should not be subsidized, and that should be related with the market rate at that particular location where the parking is being provided. Then only we will be able to get certain revenue, otherwise the money is going to be more in the maintenance area rather than gaining something. Now, when we are looking at this, the one feature which we have come up in recent past is for the construction of the multi-level car parks, MLCP. So, this is multi-level car park. So, 3, 4, 5 story system has been provided, where at every level number of vehicles can be parked, and therefore, we may have 100 parkings at a limited space or 200 or 500 parkings at that limited space. Now, what is being observed is that these MLCPs, they are not being utilized by the private vehicles throughout the day in the same extent. The utilization factor is not same. And looking at that aspect, if there is a possibility of allowing the parking of high occupancy vehicles and commercial vehicles in that area, more specifically during the off peak periods, and that too on the chargeable basis, then this is also going to give us more revenue, because otherwise this space is being left underutilized for some time periods. Then the heavy vehicles parking at dedicated locations near the commercial areas needs to be provided, because there are going to be requirements in terms of either the loading of the material or unloading of the material. So, whatever material they have carried for that area. So, if this dedicated space is there, that also needs to be looked at. As I said previously, when we were talking about a case where that the public transportation is being provided in an area, or whether it is not being provided. So, we have to see that those IPTs which are going to work as an access mode to say the bus system or to the metro system or to any other system which is available within the city for the movement within the city or the commuting within the city or in amongst the payers of the city. So, there whether we can have a prioritized or subsidized parking for these type of vehicles. So, this is going to be a dedicated space being provided very near to those locations, so that the people who are desirous to use these public transportations do not face a problem to reach there and come out of that location and reach their own destination. This also needs to be looked at near the various public buildings or the locations where the gatherings may be there. Then the prioritized parking for the emergency vehicle is also an important aspect. If under any eventual condition this emergency vehicle is not available in the nearby location, then this may translate into more of the fatal conditions. So, we should have locations which are dedicated where only the emergency vehicle is being allowed to be parked. Drop up and pick up locations needs to be identified, and these can be near to the public transport stops or terminals. They can be near say schools also, they can also be near commercial locations, because it may happen that person is picking or dropping the spouse at that location, both may be working. So, the both are working in different areas or different localities. So, that may happen. So, looking at those aspects, that what is the way, what is the travel pattern in that area, we should take a decision. And once all of these things have not worked, as I said, then we have to go for a construction, and this construction can be in different forms. It can be in the form that we have a road and there is a dedicated space which is a surface lot or a garage, or it can be development is there as a multi-level development. So, this is a ground level. So, there is a possibility of having the basement being used for the parking of vehicles. So, underground parking can be there, or there may be a possibility that this is being used as MLCP. So, the vehicles are going to be parked on these different floors of the building, or there can be a rooftop car park because no other location is there. Therefore, all of those buildings which are there in that area, they have been designed in such a manner that the vehicles can be taken to the top and they can be parked there, because at ground level there is no space available. Enforcement is an issue which has to be there in each every case, whether you are talking about the traffic movements, whether you are talking about any other planning conditions. Here also the same thing is there. We should have the enforcement officers in different localities who will try to see that based on the provisions being made in that area for the parking of vehicles, whether they have been followed or not by the parkers. The various associated features in terms of either the possibility of parking at a location or not parking at a location, or availability of the spaces in that area, can be done by way of the signs, which can be the fixed signs, which can be the variable message signs. Police control can also be there. We can educate the people, or the ITS enabled mobile applications can also be installed or can also be created, so that people can get an idea that if they are going to a certain area at certain point of a time in a day, what is the possibility of getting a parking space in that area. So, whether they should travel by their own vehicle or they should hire a vehicle and travel by that, which is going to be more feasible. So, looking at all of these things, then what is going to be the objectives of the provision of parking spaces in any area? The very first thing is that we need to look at the parking demand, and not only we should try to satisfy that, we should also try to see that whether this parking demand can be reduced. So, that sort of policy measures, if can be taken into an area, may help to manage the things with the available spaces in that area. It can also be used as a tool to decongest the roads. So, the congestion has been removed and the circulation area has been improved in that area. Then improvement in the utilization of the available parking spaces. Haphazard parking is not being allowed. A very systematic orderly parking is there by way of the type of vehicle, location being defined, etc. So, this will result in a better utilization of those spaces, and as I said, it is also going to help in the economic development of the area adjacent to those parking spaces. Promotion of public transport and non-motorized transport together is also a possibility if we devise the policies, or if we manage the areas in such a manner that it promotes public transport, and the access to public transport is either through non-motorized transport or either through the IPT. And then obviously, when all of these things have been done, it is going to culminate finally in the better environmental conditions. So, what can be the general guideline or the principles which can be followed here? Very first thing is the optimal utilization of spaces needs to be ensured. And when we say this, it means that whatever the total parkings which are being provided, at what level these parkings are being utilized. So, that is defined as a parking index. We are going to talk about that in subsequent discussion also. Then making the spaces available to cater to occasional demand. That means there are going to be some additional spaces which remain vacant. And as and when there is an occasional demand, then this additional spaces are going to help you out in sustaining the demand in that area. So, the supply and demand, they are going to be correlated in that form. The reduction in the long term parking per space, that is one thing which we should try to do it, and if we do that, it means the short term parking is going to increase. And when we say short term parking, so say long term parking was for 8 hours and the short term parking is say it was for say 2 hours. So, it means within the same time frame there are going to be 4 vehicles which are going to occupy the same space. So, the turnover is going to increase, 4 vehicles per space it becomes now. Managing the long term parkings majorly off the street, that is one thing we should try to identify such locations. Managing parking spaces considering the land value as well as the demand in that area. So, this is also an important thing, because whatever we are developing, as I said that it should not be a totally subsidized system, we have to levy some fee on that, and if we have done that, what is the value of that fee is going to be dependent on the value of the land in that area also, as well as the demand in that area. So, if there is a lot of demand, then it is going to be a highly priced parking location. Prioritizing the parking spaces. So, when we are prioritizing these parking spaces means whether we are giving more emphasis to the motorized two wheelers or cars or heavy vehicles, then again this is going to be correlated with the land. So, what is the type of activity which is there, what is the type of land use which is there may define that what type of vehicles needs to be there more at that location. Say one example which we take we have discussed was the public transportation terminals. So, metro station is there. So, should we have more spaces being dedicated to IPT and the non motorized transport like cycle rickshaw, e-rickshaw, etc. So, if that is there, then people will be driven to use these vehicles more than their own private vehicles, and therefore, the demand in that area is going to reduce, which can be utilized for some different vehicles. Then using the parking policies to reduce the need of parking spaces, and this can also be used as a tool to increase the share of public transportation. Say one example can be park and ride. So, you come with your vehicle, park your vehicle and ride the public transportation. So, this combination is being done, and therefore, the public transportation usage is going to increase. Then the use of technology to inform parkers regarding availability of parking spaces at a location in an area. We discussed about VMS and all. So, it helps in terms of reducing the search time, the congestion possibilities which can be there, because lot many vehicles are coming in that area and only few are getting parking spaces, or the drivers fatigue which can be there is being reduced. We can make the fee collection system electronic, so it becomes faster, there is no manual intervention, everything goes quite smooth, freeing the carriageway to make all of those widths available for the traffic, and that means it is going to be utilized to the full capacity. So, that is also another thing which can be looked at. High demand areas shall have multi-level parking facilities, MLCPs, and everything remains chargeable here. Whatever we design, they should be pleasant and they should also be accessible. When we say accessible, it means we have the activity in this area. So, lot many activities are being there and the traffic moves in this way. So, therefore, every vehicle is going to like to park in front of these activity areas. So, if it is this space is being provided, it is fine, but say if we are talking about a case that there is a off street parking facility like this. So, if this off the street parking facility is there, then the person has to walk this much distance. So, whether this is an acceptable distance to walk. So, that is also an important aspect needs to be looked at. So, accessibility of those parking spaces, accessibility of those locations. It should not happen that the person parks the vehicle here and then they have to take another vehicle so as to go to the activity area. Then growth rates in the vehicle ownership also needs to be taken into consideration. Along with that, we have to see what is the master plan of that area, which will define that how the land uses are going to change or they are going to increase in their sizes, and that is going to define the amount of activity which will be there, that is going to define the generation, that is going to define the attraction in that area, and these things are also going to further define in the form of the parking requirements. So, we have to take all of these things into consideration. Apart from that, the trip making patterns and the changes in the socioeconomic profiles of the users are also going to make a difference. So, there has been a continuous improvement in the living standards, and if that is there, that may culminate into the purchase of more vehicles by a household. And if this is happening, then it means they require more space for the parking of those vehicles. So, that is how the things are correlated. So, once we have an idea that what needs to be done, then let us come to the first type of the parking system, and that is the on street parking system. Now, when we say this on street parking system, this is the most liked parking by any of the user. This may be for you, it may be for me also, because it allows us to park our vehicle on the side of the road in front of that area where we are desiring to have some activity. So, this is being done on the curb side near the edge of the carriageway. But when we are talking about this sort of a system, then that should be marked. It should not be a case where it is an unmarked system. So, it should be marked by a continuous white strip which is parallel to the edge of the carriageway. So, this is the edge of the carriageway, and if we are saying that we are going to allow the parking here, so that means the vehicles are being allowed to park in this form in the area. So, this is a continuous white strip. Now, this space which is going to be dedicated for the parking of vehicles on the street, this is going to be defined by the type of the vehicle which is allowed to be parked here, the angle with respect to the curb at which it is going to be parked, and of course, we also require to see that what is going to be the circulation requirements for these vehicles which when they get parked or when they are get unparked. So, we may have a situation that the vehicles are being parked at an angle theta in this form, or they are at just a parallel situation with respect to the curve, and they are going to define that how much space is required in those cases. So, there can be a parallel parking, there will be a angled parking, and there can be a perpendicular parking. The three conditions can be there. So, we are talking about the angled parking, the parallel parking, and the perpendicular parking. So, all of these things have the pros and cons in terms of the availability of the spaces, in terms of the way the vehicle is going to be parked or taken out, the circulation spaces which are required, the width which are required for the parking of these vehicles along the curb side. So, lot many things are there which needs to be taken into consideration when we talk about these different patterns of parking. So, what can be these points of differentiation? They are being listed here. Very first thing is the width and length occupied along the curve. So, if I am parking a vehicle which is parallel, then this is the space which is required and this is the width which is required. So, this is L, this is W. But if I am parking this vehicle perpendicular, then this is the width here and this becomes the length. So, now the space is that you are going out to from the curb side. Ease of parking and unparking. So, how this vehicle is going to be in this, or it coming out, or if this vehicle is to come out or get into this form of a parking pattern, then how much space is required at the back of it. That is also another important thing. Total number of vehicles which can be parked. So, obviously, when you are talking about the length of the vehicle along the curb side, so this is going to come into the minimum values. When you are talking about with respect to the width of the vehicle along the curb side, then this is going to come in the maximum numbers. So, that is also an important issue, because you have to see that what is the demand in that area, and accordingly this supply has to be adjusted. So, supply versus demand is going to be settled by way of even the use of angled parking. Circulation space required at the back of the parking area, we have talked about it. Time required for parking maneuvers depending on how complex it is. So, it may take more time. So, if it is a parallel parking, probably it may take more time, but if it is an angled parking, then this may take lesser of time to park or unpark of a vehicle. Width of the carriageway required for one side or both side of parking, we already have talked about the values. Suitability for a vehicle type and the safety of vehicle and other road users, because when this vehicle is coming out and there is another vehicle which is moving on the road, so this will become the point of conflict. So, we have to consider this type of a scenario also. So, based on these points, let us look at the various types of the parking patterns. So, here this is a parallel parking pattern. What you can see is that the total width of the carriageway has been this, but when these vehicles are being parked and you can see they have been parked on both the sides, then the effective carriageway width has reduced to this value, and if there is a lot of traffic on this, then it becomes a constrained situation, one thing. Second thing is that we said that this should be a defined one, but here in this case what we found is that this is not defined one, there is no parallel white strip is not there. In this case there is a marking being provided which defines that the vehicles are allowed to be parked on that side and they are being parked parallel to the curb side. It means the minimum numbers are going to be there, and that is because the width of the carriageway has to be taken into consideration along with the two directional traffic which is there. So, that decision is being considered here. So, that means we are going to have less numbers of vehicles being parked along the curve. There is going to be a to and fro movements when they park and unpark the vehicle. So, it may take more of the time, more of the effort for it, but when they come out of the system, then they may require lesser of the space on the side, so that they get merged or diverged from the traffic in terms of unparking or parking respectively. Here in this case, another important thing which you can see is this line or a strip being provided at a distance away from the marked locations. So, these are the marked locations for the parking of vehicles, and that is an angled parking. So, why it is being provided is that the vehicles which are moving, they will be moving away from this line, and therefore, there is a gap which is there, and when this vehicle comes out, then there are less of the possibilities of having any hazardous interaction. So, this is one thing. Another thing is it also allows the space for the movement of the drivers if the space is not available on the other side. If it is available on the other side, then they should use that footpath rather than this particular space. But even if this is being provided, what you can see here in this photograph is that the vehicle is coming out from the parking and there is a two-wheeler which is moving on a road, and now there is a possibility of a hazardous interaction between the two. So, this is one negative thing, because when the driver is taking the vehicle out, he or she is not having the visibility of the vehicles which are moving on the main highway. So, this is going to be a problematic situation here. Here we can see that this is a 30 angle parking, and in the 30 angle parking the vehicles have been parked, and the circulation space which is being provided is minimum 3600 mm or 3.6 meters. This is a case when the vehicles are being parked only on one side, but say there is a circulation area and on both the sides of it the vehicles are being parked, then this has to be increased to 4.2 meters, and if it is a two-way traffic, then this is increased to 6.3 meters. Now, another thing which we can understand is that how much space is being utilized. So, this is the space which is being utilized here, and this can be divided into two parts. So, if this is L and this is W and this is theta, then this becomes L sin theta and this becomes W cos theta. So, this is the amount of space which is going to be utilized by this parked vehicle. Along with that, if we are looking at this space, then this is going to be L cos theta and this will be W sin theta. So, the together this one is going to define that how much space along the length of the curve is being utilized. So, this is the same thing which can be done in rest of the cases too. This is a case of a 45 degree. Now, in the case of this, what you can see is that this is being increased by 0.6 meters. So, it becomes 4.2 meters if it is a one side one way movement, and one side the parking is there. When you have two side parking with one way movement, it is 4.8, but if it is a two way, then it remains at 6.3. Then when we come to the 60 degree angle, then this becomes constant as 4.8 meters for a one way movement for either one side or a two side parking, but when it is a two way with a two side parking, then it is increased to 6.6 meters at this particular angle. Now, one other thing is that when the vehicles are coming from this side, then they are going into the parking like this, and when it has to come back, then it will come back and then go straight like in this form. But when you are talking about a two way, so this vehicle comes from here, gets into it, or this comes back here and goes into. Similarly, the vehicle comes here and then it will be coming out and then goes in this form. So, the circulation spaces are required because of these type of maneuverability or the movements which will be there during parking or unparking of the vehicles. This is for a 90-degree condition. Obviously, in the case of 90-degree condition, we are utilizing the curve space to the maximum. Therefore, this results in maximum supply, whereas at 45-degree angle, whatever we have talked about as a optimal supply which will be there, and all of these angles they are also correlated with the type of vehicle. Say if you have a bigger size of a vehicle, truck or a bus, then for that bus or truck maybe 30-degree is going to be more conducive. If you are talking about a motorized two-wheeler, then 90-degree is also going to be good enough. That means they are being parked perpendicular to the curve. If it is car, then 60-degree looks to be more conducive for that. Even 45-degree can also work. So, depending on the type of vehicle also, the choice of the angle can also be looked at. So, there are two things which we are looking at here. One is the type of the vehicle, another one is the amount of spaces which are going to be there. So, in one case it is maximum. If you are talking about 90-degree, it is minimum. Say when you are saying not 90-degree, this is 180-degree. So, then we are saying it is maximum or minimum spaces. So, 180-degree minimum spaces, 90-degree you are going to get maximum spaces. So, that can be corrected in this form. Now, another issue which is to be looked at is on street parking, and this is related with the pricing of that on street parking. There are different methods by way of which this parking can be priced. It is like pay and display parking, or it can be a disc parking. It can be by way of the installation of the parking meters. It may be a coupon based parking, or there are different other variants which have been utilized for the parking or the pricing of that. Say if you have an employee based parking, it may be charged by the employer, it may be provided free of cost by the employee to the employer to the employees. In the residential area, this may be purchased. Say you are in a society, so you have purchased a space, and that particular space is being utilized for the parking of your vehicle, but you cannot park your vehicle at any other location. There can be the parking permits. Parking permits, that there is a particular area in which you can take your vehicle, you can park your vehicle. So, the coupons in that sense or the permits in that sense has been issued by a competent authority, and based on that only those vehicles which have those tickets, they can get in and park their vehicle. So, it becomes a restricted area where the specific permissions have been given to specific vehicles or the specific owners of those vehicles. Controlled parking zones are also possibilities. That means, we have created in different area different zones. They are based on either the type of vehicle, there may be on the basis of different other policy interventions which we have discussed previously, and then that is going to define that whether the person can come and park in that area or not. So, this is a total again a different type of controls can be there. So, this is also one thing which can be looked at, and these controlled parking zones they can also be translated into the PBD, which is the parking business district. So, this is also another terminology which is used. So, that means it defines an area where the all type of parkings have been designated, marked, can be utilized by a type of a vehicle at a time in a day at a particular location, chargeable and being managed by an agency in whole of that area. So, that becomes a sort of a cordoned zone or an area. Alternate side of the carriageway parking. So, we can see that we have these two type conditions. So, the carriageway is there and traffic is moving in both the directions. So, we can say that on this side it is Monday, Wednesday and Friday. On this side it is Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, and then Sunday we can have on both the sides. So, this is a type of alternate side of parking which can be there, or there may be a possibility if this carriageway width is restricted, then we can say that on even days on this side and on odd days on the other side the parking will be there, and that helps in a sense that whatever the development is there, the economic activities are there on these two areas, they are going to be affected equally. So, it is not that the one is being affected more than as compared to the another one. So, we will be continuing with our these 4 types of parking pricing systems in our subsequent interaction, and I will close our interaction at this point, and we will be continuing with the rest of the things in the next interaction. Till then, thank you and bye.